Welcome to Moonlight Temple, your sanctuary for ancient wisdom and peaceful rest. Tonight, we embark on a gentle journey through the most profound Buddhist teachings that have guided souls toward inner peace for over 2,000 years. As you settle into comfort, allow these timeless words to wash over you like a calm river, carrying away the stress and worries of your day. The Buddha once said that within each of us lies a jewel more precious than any earthly treasure. This jewel is our capacity for peace, wisdom, and true happiness. Tonight, as the world grows quiet around you, we will uncover this treasure together. You need not believe anything, nor change anything about yourself. Simply listen, breathe, and let these ancient truths settle into your heart like gentle snow. The Four Noble Truths, understanding life's deepest mysteries. In a quiet grove in ancient India, under the spreading branches of a Bodhi tree, a young prince named Siddhartha made a discovery that would change the world forever. After years of searching for the meaning of life, he finally understood why humans suffer and, more importantly, how we can find lasting peace. These insights became known as the Four Noble Truths, and they hold keys to unlocking the contentment your heart has always sought. Imagine for a moment that you are walking through your daily life and you begin to notice something peculiar. No matter how much you achieve, how much you acquire, or how perfectly things seem to go, there is always something missing. A restlessness that follows you like a shadow. This, the Buddha realized, is the first truth about human existence. The first noble truth tells us that life contains suffering. But this is not a pessimistic view, it is simply honest. Birth itself is a struggle. Growing older brings aches and limitations we never expected. We get sick, despite our best efforts to stay healthy. We lose people we love, and eventually, we ourselves will die. Even in our daily lives, we meet people we dislike, we part from those we cherish, and our desires often remain unfulfilled. For those who cling tightly to how they want things to be, everything becomes a source of frustration. Think about your own life for a moment. How many times have you thought, if only I had this, then I would be happy, only to discover that happiness remained elusive even after getting what you wanted? This is not because you are doing something wrong. This is simply how life works when we do not understand its deeper nature. But here is where the Buddha's wisdom becomes truly revolutionary. He did not stop at identifying the problem. He discovered exactly what causes this suffering, and this insight forms the second noble truth. The root of our suffering lies in craving, not just for material things, but for life to be different than it is. We crave sensual pleasures, thinking they will satisfy us permanently. We crave for things to stay the same when we like them, and for things to change when we do not. Most deeply, we crave for a sense of self that feels solid and permanent in a world that is constantly changing. These cravings are like drinking salt water when we are thirsty. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. Consider how this plays out in modern life. You work hard to buy a beautiful house, and for a time, it brings you joy, but soon you start noticing the things that need repair, or you begin wanting a bigger house in a better neighborhood. The house itself has not changed, but your relationship to it has. This is not a flaw in you. This is how the mind naturally operates when it does not understand the temporary nature of all things. The Buddha saw that our suffering comes not from external circumstances, but from our internal resistance to the way things actually are. When we fight against reality, we always lose. When we accept reality as it is, we find peace, even in difficult situations. This leads us to the third noble truth, which is perhaps the most hopeful message ever delivered to humanity. The Buddha declared that suffering can end, not by changing the world to match our preferences, but by changing our relationship to the world. When we let go of our desperate clinging to how we think things should be, suffering naturally falls away like autumn leaves from a tree. Imagine what your life would feel like if you could remain peaceful, regardless of what happened around you. Not indifferent or cold, but genuinely at peace. This is not a fantasy. It is your birthright as a human being. The capacity for this peace lies within you right now, waiting to be uncovered. The fourth noble truth provides the practical pathway to this freedom. It is called the Noble Eightfold Path, and it consists of 8 interconnected practices that gradually transform how we see and engage with life. These are not commandments from above, but rather guidelines discovered through careful observation of what actually leads to happiness and what leads to suffering. The path begins with right view, seeing things as they truly are rather than through the lens of our fears and desires. When we understand that everything in life is temporary and interconnected, we naturally become less grasping and more accepting. Right intention follows, the genuine desire to live in a way that causes no harm to ourselves or others. Right speech means speaking truthfully and kindly, avoiding words that wound or mislead. Right action involves living ethically, treating all beings with respect and compassion. Right livelihood asks us to earn our living in ways that do not cause suffering to others. Right effort is the balanced energy we bring to our spiritual development, neither forcing nor being lazy. Right mindfulness is the practice of staying present and aware in each moment, rather than being lost in thoughts about the past or future. Finally, right concentration is the ability to focus the mind clearly and calmly, like still water that perfectly reflects the moon. These 8 aspects of the path work together, like the spokes of a wheel. As you develop one, it naturally supports the development of the others. You do not need to perfect them all at once. Even taking small steps along this path brings immediate benefits to your peace of mind. The beauty of these 4 noble truths is that they require no special beliefs or complicated practices. They simply ask you to look honestly at your own experience and notice what actually brings happiness and what brings suffering. As you do this with patience and kindness toward yourself, wisdom naturally arises. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, consider carrying one simple insight with you. Life becomes much easier when we stop fighting against what is and start working skillfully with what we have. This does not mean becoming passive. It means becoming wise about where to direct our energy. Like water flowing around rocks in a stream, we can learn to move through life with grace and effectiveness while maintaining our inner peace. The web of interconnection. How everything touches everything. There is a profound truth that modern science is only beginning to understand, but which Buddhist wisdom has recognized for millennia. Nothing in this universe exists independently. Everything arises and passes away due to conditions connected to everything else in an intricate web of relationships that stretches across time and space. Understanding this truth, called dependent origination, can fundamentally transform how we see ourselves and our place in the world. Picture a spider's web glistening with morning dew. Touch one strand, and the entire web trembles. Each thread supports and is supported by every other thread. Remove any single strand, and the web's integrity changes. This is how the Buddha saw reality, not as a collection of separate, independent objects, but as a vast network of interconnected conditions. Consider something as simple as the clothes you are wearing right now. These garments exist because of countless conditions coming together. Cotton plants grew in soil, enriched by decomposed leaves from previous seasons. Rain fell from clouds, formed by evaporation from distant oceans. Farmers planted and tended the crops, using knowledge passed down through generations. Workers harvested the cotton, machines processed it into fabric, designers created patterns, seamstresses assembled the pieces. The clothes reached you through a network of transportation, stores, and economic systems. Without any one of these conditions, your clothes would not exist. This same principle applies to everything in your life, including your own body and mind. Your body exists because of the food you eat, which grew in soil nourished by countless life forms. Your thoughts arise based on your experiences, which were shaped by the people you met, the books you read, the culture you were born into. Even your sense of being a separate individual is created by conditions, your memories, your relationships, your ongoing experiences with the world. The Buddha used a beautiful metaphor to illustrate this truth. He said that if you look deeply into a flower, you can see the entire universe. The flower contains the rain that nourished it, the soil that supported it, the sun that energized it, the gardener who planted it, and the countless generations of flowers that came before it. The flower is not separate from these conditions. It is these conditions appearing in the form of a flower. This understanding has profound implications for how we think about suffering and happiness. When we believe that we are separate, isolated individuals, we naturally become fearful and defensive. We think our happiness depends on getting what we want and avoiding what we do not want. But when we truly understand our interconnected nature, we realize that our well-being is intimately connected to the well-being of everything around us. Imagine two different ways of experiencing a traffic jam. In the first scenario, you see yourself as separate from the other drivers, competing for limited space on the road. Each delay becomes a personal affront, each slow-moving car an obstacle to your happiness. Your mind fills with frustration and anger. In the second scenario, you recognize that you and all the other drivers are part of the same interconnected system. Everyone is trying to get somewhere. Everyone has their own concerns and destinations. The traffic is not happening to you personally. It is simply a condition arising from thousands of people making travel decisions at the same time. This shift in perspective naturally brings patience and understanding. The same principle applies to more significant challenges in life. When someone treats you unkindly, instead of taking it as a personal attack, you can recognize that their behavior arises from conditions in their own life, perhaps stress, pain, or confusion. This does not mean accepting abuse or failing to protect yourself, but it does mean responding from wisdom rather than reactive emotion. When you see how their behavior is conditioned, compassion naturally arises alongside appropriate action. Understanding interconnection also reveals why kindness and generosity are not just moral choices, but practical wisdom. When you help others, you are actually supporting the web of conditions that supports your own life. When you harm others, you are damaging the very network of relationships that sustains you. This is not mystical thinking. It is simply recognizing how deeply embedded we are in each other's lives. Consider how this plays out in your daily relationships. When you speak kindly to someone, that kindness ripples outward. The person you spoke to is more likely to treat the next person they meet with kindness. That kindness continues to spread, eventually creating conditions that make your own life more pleasant. Similarly, when you approach your work with care and dedication, you contribute to systems that benefit many people, including yourself. You are not separate from the community you serve. You are an integral part of it. This understanding also brings tremendous comfort when facing loss and change. When someone you love dies, the conventional view sees this as a complete ending, a permanent separation. But from the perspective of interconnection, you can recognize that the love you shared continues to live in your heart, influencing how you treat others. The wisdom they shared with you continues to guide your decisions. The kindness they showed you enables you to be kind to others. In this sense, they continue to be present in the world through the conditions they helped create. Even your own death, when viewed from this perspective, becomes less frightening. The elements that make up your body will return to the earth, nourishing new life. The love you have given will continue to influence others long after you are gone. The knowledge you have gained will live on in the people you have taught or influenced. You are not a separate entity that simply disappears. You are part of an ongoing process that continues to unfold. This does not mean that your individual life does not matter. On the contrary, understanding interconnection reveals how profoundly significant each moment of your existence truly is. Every choice you make, every word you speak, every thought you think sends ripples through the web of existence. You have the power to contribute to conditions that increase wisdom and compassion in the world, or to conditions that increase confusion and suffering. This is both a tremendous responsibility and an incredible opportunity. The practice of recognizing interconnection begins with simple awareness. As you go through your day, notice how everything you encounter depends on countless other things. The food you eat, the air you breathe, the technology you use, the people you meet, all are gifts from the vast network of life. This recognition naturally cultivates gratitude and humility. You can also practice seeing the interconnected nature of your emotions and reactions. When you feel angry, notice what conditions led to that anger. Perhaps you are tired, or hungry, or stressed about something unrelated to the immediate situation. Recognizing these conditions does not mean ignoring your feelings, but it does mean understanding them in context. This understanding naturally creates space between you and your reactions, allowing you to respond more wisely. As you settle into sleep tonight, imagine yourself as part of the vast web of existence. Feel how you are supported by the earth beneath you, nourished by the air around you, connected to all the people who have contributed to making your life possible. Rest in the knowledge that you belong here, that you are an essential part of the ongoing story of life on this planet. Let this sense of connection fill you with peace as you drift into restful sleep. The illusion of the permanent self. One of the most liberating discoveries you can make is also one of the most challenging to understand. The self that you take to be so solid and real, the I that seems to be the central character in your life's story, is actually more like a flowing river than a fixed statue. This insight, when truly understood, can free you from countless forms of suffering that arise from trying to protect and maintain something that was never solid to begin with. Close your eyes for a moment and try to find this self that you call I. Where exactly is it located? Is it in your thoughts? But thoughts come and go constantly, appearing and disappearing like clouds in the sky. Is it in your body? But your body is continuously changing, every cell replacing itself, every breath bringing new air while releasing the old. Is it in your memories? But memories shift and fade, and you clearly exist even when you are not remembering anything. Is it in your emotions? But emotions arise and pass away, like weather patterns, sometimes calm, sometimes stormy, always in flux. The Buddha used a powerful analogy to help people understand this truth. He compared what we call the self to a chariot. A chariot has wheels, an axle, a body, and reins. We give this collection of parts a name, chariot, and we think of it as a single thing. But if you remove the wheels, where is the chariot? If you take away the axle, what happened to the chariot? The truth is that chariot is simply a useful label we give to a temporary arrangement of parts. The chariot has no independent existence apart from its components. Similarly, what we call the self is a collection of constantly changing physical and mental processes. There is a body that breathes, digests, and moves. There are sensations of seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and smelling. There are thoughts arising and passing away. There are emotions flowing through like currents in a stream. There is consciousness aware of all these processes. But there is no fixed, unchanging entity that we can point to and say, "This is the real me." This might sound frightening at first. After all, we have spent our entire lives believing in and protecting this sense of self. We have built our identity around it, made decisions to enhance it, worried about threats to it. But discovering the fluid nature of the self is actually profoundly liberating. It means that you are not trapped by who you think you are. You are not limited by your past mistakes or current limitations. You are a process, not a product, always capable of growth, change, and transformation. Consider how this understanding applies to self-criticism. How often do you tell yourself stories like, "I am a failure," "I am not good enough," or "I always mess things up"? These statements assume there is a fixed self that possesses these qualities permanently. But when you recognize that you are a process rather than a thing, these statements lose their power. Instead of, "I am a failure," you might say, "Failure happened in this situation." Instead of, "I am not good enough," you might recognize, "Feelings of inadequacy are arising right now." This shift in language reflects a shift in understanding that can dramatically reduce unnecessary suffering. The same principle applies to positive self-concepts. When good things happen, the ego wants to claim credit and build a story about how wonderful it is. But this too causes suffering, because now you have a positive self-image to protect and maintain. You start worrying about whether you can live up to this image, whether others will see through it, whether it will last. When you understand that there is no fixed self to be wonderful or terrible, you can simply appreciate positive experiences without the burden of making them mean something about your identity. This insight also transforms how you relate to other people. When someone behaves in ways you do not like, instead of concluding, "They are a bad person," you can recognize unskillful behavior is arising in them right now. This perspective naturally increases your compassion because you understand that people are not fixed in their patterns. Everyone has the capacity to change and grow. Even someone who has caused great harm is not essentially a harmful person. They are a process that has been conditioned to act harmfully. This understanding does not excuse harmful behavior, but it does create space for forgiveness and the possibility of healing. The freedom that comes from understanding the fluid nature of the self extends to every area of life. If you have been thinking of yourself as shy, you can recognize that shyness is simply a pattern that arises in certain conditions. It is not your essential nature. If you have been thinking of yourself as unlucky, you can see that this is just a story you have been telling yourself based on selected memories. It is not a fundamental truth about who you are. If you have been thinking of yourself as broken or damaged, you can understand that these are temporary conditions, not permanent features of your being. This understanding also brings a healthy humility. When you truly see that there is no solid self to protect or promote, competition becomes less important. You no longer need to prove your worth or defend your ego. You can listen to criticism without feeling threatened, because there is no fixed self being criticized. You can celebrate others' successes without feeling diminished, because there is no limited self that loses when others win. You can make mistakes without shame, because there is no permanent self that is defined by those mistakes. But perhaps the most beautiful aspect of this understanding is how it reveals your true nature. When you stop trying to maintain the illusion of a separate, solid self, what remains is pure awareness, spacious, peaceful, and free. This awareness is not yours, in the way that thoughts and emotions seem to belong to you. It is more like the sky in which all experiences arise and pass away. Clouds move through the sky, but they do not stain it. Storms may rage, but the sky remains untroubled. Similarly, thoughts and emotions move through awareness, but they do not fundamentally disturb its essential peace. This does not mean that you stop functioning as an individual. You still have preferences, make decisions, and take care of your responsibilities. But you do these things with much greater ease and effectiveness when you are not carrying the burden of defending and promoting a self that does not actually exist. You become like an actor who plays their role skillfully, while never forgetting that it is just a role. The practice of seeing through the illusion of a permanent self begins with simple observation. Throughout your day, notice how your sense of self changes. In the morning, you might feel confident and energetic. By afternoon, you might feel tired and irritable. In the evening, you might feel peaceful and content. Which one is the real you? The truth is that all of these are temporary states arising and passing away in awareness. None of them define your essential nature. You can also practice releasing attachment to your personal history. While it is useful to learn from the past, you do not need to carry it as a burden or wear it as an identity. The person who made mistakes yesterday is not the same as the person who is here today. You are free to respond to each situation with fresh wisdom rather than being trapped by old patterns. As you prepare for sleep tonight, let go of the need to be anyone in particular. You do not need to maintain any image or protect any identity. Rest in the simple awareness that is your true nature, open, spacious, and free. Allow yourself to dissolve into this awareness like a drop of water returning to the ocean. In this dissolution, find the peace that surpasses all understanding. The true nature of reality, beyond appearance and illusion. What if everything you think you know about reality is like looking at the world through a funhouse mirror? The Buddha discovered that our ordinary way of perceiving and interpreting the world creates a kind of cosmic, optical illusion. We see things as solid when they are flowing, permanent when they are temporary, separate when they are connected. Tonight, let us gently explore what lies beyond these appearances and discover the profound peace that comes from seeing reality as it truly is. Imagine holding a handful of sand at the beach. To your eyes, each grain appears to be a separate, solid object. But scientists tell us that each grain is mostly empty space, with tiny particles vibrating in patterns of energy. The solidity we experience is created by our senses and interpreted by our minds. The sand is real, but not in the way it appears to be. This is a perfect metaphor for how the Buddha saw all of existence. Everything we encounter seems to have a fixed nature. We look at a mountain and see something permanent and unchanging. We look at other people and see them as essentially the same from day to day. We look at ourselves and assume we are the same person who existed yesterday. But this apparent stability is like a movie. When you watch a film, you see smooth motion, but the movie is actually composed of thousands of still frames, flashing by so quickly that your brain creates the illusion of continuous movement. The Buddha taught that all of existence is like this movie. What appears solid and permanent is actually a continuous flow of momentary events, arising and passing away with incredible speed. Your body seems stable, but every cell is constantly being replaced. Your thoughts seem to belong to you, but they arise spontaneously based on countless conditions and then disappear. Your emotions feel substantial, but they are like weather patterns, always changing, never the same from moment to moment. This understanding has profound implications for how we approach problems in our lives. When you are going through a difficult time, it feels like the difficulty is solid and permanent. Your mind tells you stories like, "This will never end," or "Things will never get better." But when you see through the illusion of permanence, you realize that even your most challenging experiences are flows of temporary conditions. Just as storms always pass, leaving clear skies behind, your current difficulties are also temporary patterns that will inevitably change. Consider the last time you felt overwhelmed by a problem that seemed impossible to solve. At the time, it probably felt completely real and solid. But look back now, where is that problem today? Even if some aspects of it remain, the problem itself has changed, your understanding of it has evolved, and your relationship to it has shifted. What seemed like an immovable mountain was actually more like a cloud formation, appearing solid from a distance, but dissolving when you got closer. The Buddha used many beautiful metaphors to help people understand this truth. He said that all phenomena are like dreams, vivid and compelling while you are experiencing them, but recognized as insubstantial when you wake up. They are like mirages, appearing real from a distance, but revealed as optical illusions when you approach them closely. They are like echoes, seeming to have a source, but actually just sound waves bouncing off surfaces. They are like reflections of the moon in water, beautiful and clear, but not the moon itself. This does not mean that life is meaningless or that nothing matters. Rather, it means that reality is much more fluid and workable than we usually imagine. When you understand that your problems are not as solid as they appear, you become more creative in addressing them. When you recognize that other people's difficult behavior arises from temporary conditions, you become more patient and compassionate. When you see that your own limitations are not fixed features of who you are, you become more willing to grow and change. Think about how this applies to your relationships. How often do you get frustrated with someone because they are not acting the way you want them to? In these moments, you are seeing them as a solid object that should behave in certain predictable ways. But when you remember that they are actually a flowing process, shaped by countless conditions you may not even be aware of, your frustration naturally softens into understanding. You stop trying to control their behavior and start working skillfully with the conditions that influence it. The same principle applies to your goals and ambitions. When you see your objectives as fixed targets that you must hit in exactly the way you planned, you create unnecessary stress and limitation. But when you understand that both you and your goals are part of a flowing process, you become more flexible and creative. You can adapt to changing circumstances while staying true to your deeper intentions. You work with life's natural flow rather than fighting against it. Perhaps most importantly, This understanding transforms your relationship to fear. Most of our fears are based on the assumption that bad things, once they happen, will be permanent. We fear losing our job because we imagine unemployment as a fixed state. We fear illness because we think of sickness as a solid condition. We fear death because we see it as a final ending. But when you truly understand the flowing nature of reality, you realize that nothing, neither good nor bad, ever remains the same. This does not eliminate challenges, but it does eliminate the extra suffering that comes from believing challenges are permanent. The Buddha also taught that our conventional way of thinking creates artificial divisions that do not actually exist in reality. We think in terms of self and other, good and bad, success and failure, life and death. These categories are useful for practical purposes, but they can become sources of suffering when we forget that they are mental constructs rather than absolute truths. In reality, everything exists on a spectrum, and the boundaries we draw are somewhat arbitrary. For example, consider the difference between yourself and the environment around you. Where exactly does you end and not you begin? Is the air in your lungs part of you or part of the environment? What about the food in your stomach? The bacteria in your intestines that help you digest food? The more closely you look, the more you realize that the boundary between self and world is much more fluid than it appears. You are not separate from your environment. You are an expression of it. This recognition naturally leads to what Zen Buddhism calls non-dual awareness, a way of perceiving that does not divide reality into opposing categories. In this awareness, you can appreciate differences without creating conflicts. You can make distinctions without making separations. You can engage fully with life while maintaining the deeper understanding that all apparent opposites are actually different aspects of one flowing whole. Practicing this way of seeing begins with questioning your assumptions about permanence. When you find yourself thinking, "This always happens," or "They never change," or "I can't do this," pause and ask yourself whether these statements reflect the flowing nature of reality. Notice how your experience is actually constantly shifting, even when the changes are subtle. Pay attention to how your moods, energy levels, and perspectives change throughout the day. Observe how other people reveal different aspects of themselves in different situations. You can also practice seeing the interconnected nature of apparent opposites. Light and darkness define each other. Without darkness, the concept of light would be meaningless. Joy and sorrow are similarly interconnected. Our capacity for deep happiness often comes from having experienced deep sadness. Success and failure teach us different lessons, but both contribute to our growth and understanding. When you see these apparent opposites as partners in a dance rather than enemies in a battle, life becomes much more workable. Another powerful practice is learning to rest in uncertainty. Our minds naturally want to know what will happen next, to have everything figured out and under control. But reality is inherently unpredictable, and our attempts to create certainty often lead to disappointment and stress. When you can become comfortable with not knowing what comes next, You open yourself to possibilities that your planning mind could never imagine. You learn to trust the process of life itself, rather than your limited ability to control outcomes. This does not mean becoming passive or irresponsible. You still make plans, set goals, and take appropriate action. But you hold these activities lightly, like a skilled sailor who sets a course but remains ready to adjust when the wind changes. You engage fully with life, while remembering that your plans are provisional and your understanding is always incomplete. The ultimate insight that emerges from seeing through the illusion of solid reality is a profound sense of freedom. When you realize that the limitations you have accepted are not as real as they appear, new possibilities open up. When you understand that your problems are not as permanent as they seem, you approach them with greater creativity and less desperation. When you recognize that your identity is not fixed, you become free to grow and change in ways that previously seemed impossible. This freedom is not chaotic or frightening. It is deeply peaceful. It is the peace of knowing that you are part of something much larger and more intelligent than your individual mind. It is the peace of trusting the natural flow of existence rather than constantly swimming against the current. It is the peace of recognizing that you do not have to figure everything out or control every outcome. You can simply show up with presence and compassion and allow life to unfold through you. As you settle into sleep tonight, imagine yourself as a wave on the ocean. For a moment, the wave appears to be separate from the water. It has its own shape, its own movement, its own apparent existence. But the wave is never actually separate from the ocean. It is the ocean expressing itself in the form of a wave. When the wave subsides, it does not disappear, it simply returns to its source. You too are a wave in the ocean of existence, appearing to be separate for a brief time, but never actually apart from the whole. Rest in this understanding as you drift into peaceful sleep. The mind as creator, how thoughts shape our world. There is perhaps no teaching more practical or immediately useful than understanding the power of your own mind. The Buddha made a remarkable discovery that modern psychology is only beginning to appreciate. Your experience of reality is not created by what happens to you, but by how your mind interprets and responds to what happens. Tonight, we will explore this profound truth and learn how to work skillfully with the mind's creative power. Picture two people experiencing the exact same rainfall. One person sees the rain as ruining their outdoor plans and feels frustrated and disappointed. The other person sees the rain as nourishing the earth and feels grateful for nature's abundance. The rain itself is neutral, it simply falls. But the two people live in completely different worlds based on how their minds interpret this neutral event. This simple example reveals something extraordinary about the nature of experience. The Buddha taught that the mind is like a skilled artist, constantly painting the world we experience. Just as an artist can paint the same landscape in countless different ways, realistic, abstract, dark, bright, beautiful, or disturbing, your mind paints your reality moment by moment through the lens of your thoughts, beliefs, and habitual patterns. The external world provides the canvas, but your mind provides the colors and creates the meaning. This understanding is both empowering and sobering. It is empowering because it means you have much more control over your happiness than you might have thought. You are not a victim of circumstances. You are a co-creator of your experience. It is sobering because it means you cannot blame external conditions for your suffering. If you want to change your experience of life, you must be willing to examine and transform the patterns of your own mind. Consider how this works in your daily life. When you wake up in the morning, your mind immediately begins creating your day through the thoughts you think. If your first thought is, "I don't want to get up," you begin painting your day with resistance and reluctance. If your first thought is, "I wonder what interesting things will happen today," you begin painting with curiosity and openness. The day itself has not yet happened, but your mind has already begun shaping your experience of it. This process continues throughout the day, in ways both obvious and subtle. When you encounter a challenging situation at work, your mind can paint it as an overwhelming crisis or as an opportunity to develop new skills. When someone speaks to you curtly, your mind can create a story about how they dislike you, or it can recognize that they might be having a difficult day. When you make a mistake, your mind can paint you as fundamentally flawed, or it can see the mistake as valuable feedback for improvement. The Buddha used a powerful metaphor to illustrate this truth. He said that the mind is like a magician who creates elaborate illusions that appear completely real to the audience. The magician makes objects appear and disappear, transforms one thing into another, and creates entire worlds that exist only in perception. Similarly, your mind creates your emotional and psychological reality through the stories it tells and the meanings it assigns to events. These mental creations can be so convincing that you forget they are constructions of your own mind. Understanding this does not mean dismissing your thoughts and emotions as unreal or unimportant. Your mental creations have real effects on your well-being, your relationships, and your choices. But recognizing them as creations rather than absolute truths gives you the power to work with them skillfully. You can learn to choose which thoughts to nurture and which to let go. You can develop the ability to paint more beautiful and helpful mental pictures. This process begins with developing what Buddhists call mindfulness, the ability to observe your own mental activity with clarity and compassion. Instead of being lost in your thoughts, you learn to watch them arise and pass away like clouds in the sky. Instead of believing every story your mind tells, you learn to recognize stories as stories. Instead of being controlled by your emotions, you learn to experience them as temporary weather patterns in the sky of awareness. For example, imagine you are stuck in traffic and notice anger arising. Without mindfulness, you might think, "This traffic is making me angry," and blame external circumstances for your emotional state. With mindfulness, you might recognize, "Anger is arising in my mind in response to traffic," and understand that your emotional experience is being created by your mental reaction rather than by the traffic itself. This shift in understanding immediately gives you more options for how to respond. You might notice that your anger is based on thoughts like, "I should be moving faster," or "other drivers are inconsiderate." Recognizing these as thoughts rather than facts, you can choose to think differently. You might think, traffic is a natural result of many people traveling at the same time, or this gives me a chance to practice patience. As your thoughts change, your emotional experience naturally shifts as well. This same principle applies to more significant challenges. When facing illness, your mind can paint the experience as a terrible catastrophe that ruins your life, or as an opportunity to develop resilience and appreciate simple pleasures. When dealing with financial difficulties, your mind can create stories about failure and inadequacy, or it can focus on learning about money management and discovering what truly brings happiness. When experiencing relationship conflicts, your mind can paint the other person as unreasonable and impossible, or it can look for ways to understand their perspective and communicate more effectively. The key insight is that you always have a choice about how to frame your experience. This does not mean denying problems or pretending everything is wonderful when it is not. It means recognizing that you can choose to focus on aspects of any situation that increase your wisdom and resilience, rather than aspects that increase your suffering and confusion. You can choose to paint with colors that bring out the beauty and meaning in your life, rather than colors that emphasize pain and limitation. Developing this skill requires practice and patience. Your mind has been painting your reality in certain ways for many years, and these patterns do not change overnight. But every moment offers a new opportunity to notice how your mind is creating your experience and to make more conscious choices about the mental pictures you paint. Even small shifts in perspective can have profound effects on your well-being. One powerful practice is to regularly ask yourself, what story is my mind telling right now, and is this story helpful? Notice when your mind is creating dramas, catastrophes, or limitations that may not reflect the full reality of your situation. Experiment with telling different stories, not false or overly optimistic ones, but stories that include more possibilities and focus on your capacity to handle whatever arises. Another helpful practice is cultivating what the Buddha called loving kindness, the intention for all beings, including yourself, to be happy and free from suffering. When your mind is painting with the colors of love and compassion, your entire experience of life becomes more beautiful. Challenges become opportunities to extend kindness. Difficulties become chances to develop understanding. Even painful experiences become meaningful when viewed through the lens of compassion. You can also practice recognizing the creative power of your mind by paying attention to how your thoughts affect your body. Notice how thinking about something you are grateful for creates a sense of warmth and expansion in your chest. Observe how worrying about future problems creates tension in your shoulders and stomach. Feel how remembering a peaceful moment brings relaxation to your entire being. This direct experience of the mind-body connection helps you understand how powerfully your thoughts shape your reality. As you prepare for sleep tonight, take a moment to appreciate the incredible creative power of your mind. Throughout the day, your mind has been painting your experience moment by moment. Some of these paintings may have been dark or difficult, but you have the power to choose different colors tomorrow. Rest in the knowledge that you are not a passive victim of circumstances, but an active participant in creating your experience of life. Let this understanding fill you with hope and peace as you drift into restful sleep. The hidden treasure, discovering your Buddha nature. Deep within every human being lies a treasure more precious than all the gold and jewels in the world. This treasure has been there since the moment you were born, waiting patiently to be discovered. It cannot be stolen, damaged, or destroyed. It does not depend on your accomplishments, your relationships, or your circumstances. This treasure is what Buddhists call your Buddha nature, your innate capacity for wisdom, compassion, and perfect peace. Imagine a magnificent diamond buried deep in the earth. The diamond may be covered in layers of mud and rock, making it appear worthless to those who cannot see its true nature. But the mud does not change the diamond's essential clarity and brilliance. When the mud is washed away, the diamond's natural radiance shines forth, unchanged by its temporary concealment. Your Buddha nature is like this diamond, always perfect, always present, simply waiting to be uncovered. The Buddha made an extraordinary claim that challenged everything people believed about human nature. He declared that every person, regardless of their past actions or current circumstances, possesses the same potential for enlightenment that he himself had realized. This was not merely optimistic thinking, it was based on his direct perception of the deepest truth about consciousness itself. When he looked at human beings with fully awakened vision, he saw not broken or limited creatures, but sleeping Buddhas waiting to awaken. This teaching offers tremendous hope and comfort, especially during difficult times. When you are struggling with pain, failure, or confusion, it is easy to believe that something is fundamentally wrong with you. You might think you are not spiritual enough, not good enough, or not worthy of happiness and peace. But Buddha nature teaching reveals that these feelings of inadequacy are like clouds passing in front of the sun. The clouds may temporarily obscure the light, but they do not diminish the sun's radiance. Similarly, your difficulties and limitations may temporarily obscure your Buddha nature, but they cannot damage or diminish it. Consider the story of a young man who looked into a mirror one morning and was horrified to see no reflection of his head. He searched frantically, convinced he had lost his head entirely. He ran through the streets, asking people to help him find his missing head. Of course, his head was there all along. He had simply been looking at the back of the mirror. His panic and suffering were based on a fundamental misunderstanding of the situation. In the same way, when we feel disconnected from our essential goodness and wisdom, we are not actually missing anything. We are simply looking in the wrong direction. Your Buddha nature manifests as an inexhaustible capacity for love. Think about moments when you have felt genuine compassion for someone who was suffering. In those moments, where did that love come from? It arose spontaneously from the depths of your being, without any effort or calculation. You did not have to learn how to love. You simply had to allow your natural compassion to flow. This spontaneous arising of love is a direct expression of your Buddha nature. Similarly, your Buddha nature expresses itself as natural wisdom. There have been times in your life when you knew exactly what to do in a difficult situation, even though you could not explain how you knew. There have been moments when you understood something profound about life, without anyone teaching it to you. These flashes of insight come not from your thinking mind, but from the deeper wisdom that is your birthright as a conscious being. This wisdom is always available. You simply need to learn how to access it. Your Buddha nature also appears as an unshakable peace that exists beneath all your emotional turmoil. Even during your most anxious or upset moments, there is something within you that remains calm and aware. This awareness watches your emotions without being overwhelmed by them. It observes your thoughts without being controlled by them. It experiences your physical sensations without being defined by them. This witnessing awareness is perhaps the most direct way to experience your Buddha nature in daily life. But if Buddha nature is always present, why do we so often feel disconnected from it? The answer lies in understanding what Buddhists call the adventitious defilements, temporary coverings that obscure our true nature. These defilements are like dust on a mirror. The dust may make it difficult to see your reflection clearly, but it does not change the mirror's essential capacity to reflect. When you clean away the dust, the mirror's reflective nature is immediately apparent. The primary defilements that obscure Buddha nature are ignorance, hatred, and greed. Ignorance is not knowing your true nature, believing you are limited, separate, and fundamentally flawed. Hatred is the energy of pushing away experiences you do not like, creating internal conflict and division. Greed is the energy of grasping after experiences you do like, creating dependency and fear of loss. These three patterns of mental energy create a kind of fog that makes it difficult to perceive the clarity and spaciousness of your essential nature. The beautiful thing about these defilements is that they are not permanent features of who you are. They are more like weather patterns, sometimes present, sometimes absent, always changing. Just as storms eventually clear to reveal the open sky, periods of confusion, anger, and craving naturally subside to reveal the peace and wisdom that were there all along. You do not need to fight against these difficult emotions. You simply need to remember that they are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. This understanding completely transforms how you relate to your own psychological struggles. Instead of seeing depression, anxiety, or anger as evidence that something is wrong with you, you can recognize them as temporary clouds passing through the sky of your awareness. This does not mean ignoring these experiences or pretending they are not difficult. It means holding them in the larger context of your essential wholeness. You can seek appropriate help for emotional difficulties while maintaining confidence in your fundamental okayness. There is a traditional story about a poor woman who had a pot of gold buried in her house, but was unaware of it. She lived in poverty, struggling to meet her basic needs. One day, a visitor noticed something glinting in the dirt floor and helped her discover the treasure that had been there all along. Suddenly, all her financial worries disappeared, not because anything new was added to her life, but because she became aware of wealth that had always been present. Discovering your Buddha nature is like this. It is not about becoming something you are not, but about recognizing what you have always been. The practical implications of this teaching are profound. When you truly understand that Buddha nature is your deepest reality, you stop looking for validation and worth outside yourself. You stop believing that you need to become someone different to be happy. You stop thinking that your past mistakes define your future possibilities. Instead, you begin the process of uncovering what has always been there, like an archaeologist carefully brushing away sand to reveal an ancient statue. This uncovering happens through what Buddhists call the practice, not complicated techniques or esoteric rituals, but simple ways of returning attention to your true nature. Every time you respond to difficulty with patience instead of reactivity, you are polishing the mirror of Buddha nature. Every time you extend kindness to someone who is struggling, you are allowing your natural compassion to shine forth. Every time you remain aware during emotional turbulence without being swept away, you are resting in the peace that is your birthright. One of the most accessible ways to connect with Buddha nature is through the practice of loving-kindness meditation. Simply bring to mind someone you care about and silently offer them wishes for happiness and well-being. Notice how this intention feels in your heart. The warmth and openness you experience is not something you create. It is your Buddha nature, expressing itself naturally. As you extend these wishes to yourself, to neutral people, and even to difficult people, you are not developing new capacities, but uncovering capacities that have always been present. Another powerful practice is simply resting in awareness itself. Right now, notice that you are aware of these words. Notice that you are aware of sounds around you, sensations in your body, thoughts in your mind. This awareness itself, not the objects of awareness, but the knowing quality that perceives them, is the most direct expression of Buddha nature available to ordinary consciousness. It requires no special training to access, no particular beliefs to adopt. It is as close to you as your own breath. The Buddha taught that recognizing Buddha nature is like the sun emerging from behind clouds. The sun does not create its own light when the clouds pass. The light was always there, simply waiting to be revealed. Similarly, when you experience moments of genuine peace, love, or wisdom, you are not manufacturing these qualities. You are simply allowing your true nature to shine forth unobstructed. This teaching offers particular comfort when dealing with guilt and regret. No matter what mistakes you have made, no matter how far you feel you have strayed from your values, your Buddha nature remains completely untouched. It is like a jewel that retains its value, even when covered in mud. Your past actions may have created difficult consequences that need to be addressed, but they have not damaged your essential capacity for wisdom and goodness. Every moment offers a fresh opportunity to align with your true nature. Understanding Buddha nature also transforms how you see other people. When someone behaves in ways that are harmful or annoying, instead of writing them off as a bad person, you can recognize that their Buddha nature is temporarily obscured by their own confusion and pain. This does not excuse harmful behavior or mean you should not protect yourself when necessary. But it does mean approaching others with the understanding that their essential nature is no different from your own. Everyone is doing their best with their current level of understanding and emotional capacity. This perspective naturally increases your patience and compassion. Just as you would not become angry at someone for having the flu, you can learn not to take others' unskillful behavior personally. Their actions arise from their temporary mental and emotional conditions, not from their essential nature. With this understanding, you can respond to difficult behavior with wisdom rather than reactivity, often helping to create conditions where others' Buddha nature can also shine forth. As you go about your daily life, you can practice recognizing Buddha nature in yourself and others. Notice moments when people act with spontaneous kindness, even in small ways. Observe the natural wisdom that emerges when people face challenges with courage and creativity. Pay attention to the innate peace that becomes visible when people let go of their worries and simply be present. These are not special or rare occurrences. They are everyday expressions of the awakened nature that exists in everyone. Perhaps most importantly, trust in your own Buddha nature. When you are facing difficulties, remember that you have within you everything you need to handle whatever arises. This does not mean you will not need help from others or that challenges will be easy. It means that your deepest nature is already whole, already wise, already capable of profound love. You are not broken and in need of fixing. You are complete and in the process of remembering. Tonight, as you settle into sleep, rest in the confidence of your own Buddha nature. You do not need to become someone different or achieve some special state. You simply need to relax into the peace and love that are your natural inheritance. Let this understanding fill you with gratitude for the incredible gift of your own consciousness. Sleep peacefully in the knowledge that you are already everything you need to be. The Garden of the Mind, understanding and transforming mental afflictions. Within the landscape of your mind grows a garden. Like any garden, it contains both flowers and weeds, helpful plants, and those that can cause harm. The Buddha taught that learning to tend this inner garden skillfully is one of the most important tasks of human life. Tonight, we will explore the nature of mental afflictions, the weeds that can overgrow the garden of the mind, and learn gentle, effective ways to cultivate the beautiful qualities that are your birthright. Imagine walking through a garden that has been neglected for some time. You might see patches of beautiful flowers struggling to bloom among overgrown weeds. Your first instinct might be to attack the weeds with aggressive force, ripping them out in frustration. But a wise gardener knows that such an approach often damages the delicate flowers nearby. Instead, the skillful gardener works patiently, creating conditions where flowers can flourish naturally, while weeds gradually lose their ability to dominate the space. The afflictions of the mind are like these weeds. They are natural phenomena that arise when certain conditions are present, but they need not define the landscape of your inner life. The main afflictions that the Buddha identified are greed, hatred, and delusion, along with their countless variations like jealousy, pride, worry, resentment, and fear. These mental states are not moral failures or signs of weakness. They are simply patterns of mental energy that every human being experiences. Understanding them clearly is the first step toward freedom. Greed, in its many forms, is the mind's tendency to grasp after experiences it finds pleasant. This might manifest as wanting more money, more recognition, more security, more pleasure, or simply more of whatever you do not currently have. The underlying belief behind greed is that happiness comes from acquiring and accumulating, but like drinking salt water when thirsty, the more you consume in search of satisfaction, the more desperately thirsty you become. The problem is not desire itself, but the belief that fulfilling desires will bring lasting contentment. Consider how this plays out in modern life. You might think that getting a promotion will finally make you feel successful and secure. But once you receive the promotion, your mind quickly adjusts and begins wanting the next level of advancement. Or you might believe that finding the perfect relationship will solve your loneliness, only to discover that even loving relationships bring their own challenges and uncertainties. This is not because promotions and relationships are bad, but because lasting happiness cannot be found in external circumstances that are constantly changing. Hatred, in its various forms, is the mind's tendency to push away experiences it finds unpleasant. This might appear as anger toward people who frustrate you, resentment about past hurts, anxiety about future possibilities, or even hatred toward yourself for not living up to your expectations. The underlying belief behind hatred is that happiness comes from eliminating everything you do not like. But life contains an endless supply of potentially unpleasant experiences, so this strategy leads to a constant state of inner warfare. Think about how much energy you spend fighting against things you cannot control. You might find yourself angry at traffic, frustrated with the weather, irritated by other people's behavior, or upset about political developments. Each of these reactions is like hitting your hand against a wall. The wall is not damaged, but your hand becomes sore. The Buddha observed that holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. Delusion is perhaps the most fundamental affliction, underlying both greed and hatred. Delusion is not seeing things as they actually are. It includes believing that you are separate and isolated, that things are permanent when they are actually changing, that external circumstances control your happiness, and that you are limited by your past conditioning. Delusion is like wearing colored glasses that distort everything you see, making it impossible to navigate life skillfully. The most pervasive delusion is the belief that you are fundamentally flawed or inadequate. This delusion manifests as the inner critic that constantly judges your appearance, your performance, your choices, and your worth. It tells you that you are not smart enough, not attractive enough, not successful enough, not spiritual enough. This critical voice seems to be trying to help you improve, but it actually undermines your confidence and natural creativity. It is like having a harsh gardener who criticizes every flower for not being perfect, creating conditions where nothing can bloom. Understanding these afflictions intellectually is helpful, but the real transformation happens when you learn to work with them directly in your daily experience. The key insight is that you do not need to eliminate difficult mental states. You need to change your relationship to them. Instead of fighting against afflictions or being controlled by them, you can learn to observe them with the same gentle attention you might give to weather patterns. When anger arises, Instead of immediately expressing it or suppressing it, you can pause and simply notice its presence. You might observe how anger feels in your body, perhaps as heat in your face, tension in your shoulders, or energy in your hands. You might notice the thoughts that accompany anger, stories about how wrong the situation is, or how the other person should behave differently. By observing anger this way, you create space between yourself and the emotion. You are no longer anger, you are awareness observing anger. This space of awareness is like stepping back from a painting to see it more clearly. When you are too close to a painting, you can only see individual brushstrokes and colors. When you step back, you can see the whole image and appreciate its composition. Similarly, when you are caught up in an afflictive emotion, you can only see the immediate situation that triggered it. When you step back into awareness, you can see the larger patterns and choose how to respond wisely. The practice of mindfulness, simply paying attention to your experience without immediately reacting, is like tending your inner garden with gentle, consistent care. You do not need to force anything to change. You simply need to notice what is present with kind awareness. This attention itself begins to transform your relationship to difficult mental states. They lose their power to control your behavior when you stop identifying with them completely. For example, instead of thinking, "I am anxious," you might notice, "Anxiety is present." Instead of "I am angry," you might observe, "Anger is arising." This subtle shift in language reflects a profound shift in understanding. Emotions become experiences you are having rather than identities you are wearing. This creates the possibility of responding to situations from your deeper wisdom rather than from temporary emotional reactions. Another powerful approach to working with afflictions is understanding their underlying wisdom. Every difficult emotion contains important information about your needs and values. Anger often arises when something you care about is being threatened or disrespected. Instead of seeing anger as purely destructive, you can appreciate it as a signal that boundaries need to be established or that important values need to be protected. The wisdom of anger is fierce compassion, the willingness to stand up for what matters. The problem comes when anger takes control and acts without the guidance of wisdom. Similarly, fear often arises when you perceive potential danger or loss. The wisdom of fear is prudent caution, the ability to recognize genuine threats and take appropriate protective action. The problem comes when fear becomes so dominant that it prevents you from taking beneficial risks or living fully. Even sadness contains wisdom. It reflects your capacity to love deeply and recognize the preciousness of what you have lost. The problem comes when sadness becomes so overwhelming that it prevents you from opening to new possibilities for connection and joy. When you can appreciate the underlying wisdom in difficult emotions, while not being controlled by their reactive energy, you begin to experience what Buddhists call the transformation of afflictions. This is not about getting rid of human emotions, but about allowing them to serve their natural function without creating unnecessary suffering. It is like learning to use fire skillfully, appreciating its capacity to provide warmth and cook food, while being careful not to let it burn down your house. This transformation happens gradually through patient practice. Each time you pause instead of reacting immediately, each time you observe your emotions with kindness instead of judgment, each time you respond from wisdom instead of being controlled by temporary feelings, you are strengthening your capacity to live from your deepest nature. You are like a gardener who consistently tends the soil, waters the plants, and removes weeds with care. Over time, the garden naturally becomes more beautiful and productive. One of the most helpful practices for working with afflictions is what Buddhists call loving kindness toward yourself. When you notice difficult emotions arising, instead of criticizing yourself for having them, you can offer yourself the same compassion you would give to a good friend who was struggling. You might silently say, "This is a moment of suffering," and "May I be kind to myself," and "May I find peace." This approach does not indulge negative emotions, but it also does not fight against them. It creates a warm, accepting container in which natural healing can occur. It is also important to remember that working with mental afflictions is not about achieving a state where you never experience difficult emotions. Even the Buddha experienced physical pain, interpersonal challenges, and the full range of human feelings. The difference was that he did not add unnecessary mental suffering to unavoidable life experiences. He could feel sadness without believing he should not feel sad. He could experience frustration without creating stories about how terrible the situation was. He could face difficulties without losing his fundamental peace and compassion. This is the realistic goal of Buddhist practice, not to eliminate the human experience, but to live it with greater wisdom and less unnecessary suffering. You will still have preferences and disappointments, joys and sorrows, successes and failures. But you can learn to hold all of these experiences in the spacious awareness that is your true nature. You can be fully human while resting in the peace that transcends all particular circumstances. As you settle into sleep tonight, practice offering kindness to all aspects of your experience. If you notice worry about tomorrow, send that worry some gentle understanding. If you feel regret about today, offer that regret some compassion. If you experience frustration with yourself, surround that frustration with acceptance. You do not need to fix anything or change anything. You simply need to hold your whole experience with the tenderness you would show to a beloved child. Rest in this unconditional kindness as you drift into peaceful sleep. The middle way, finding balance in a world of extremes. In a world that often demands that you choose sides, go to extremes, and commit fully to one approach or another, the Buddha discovered something revolutionary. He found that the path to lasting happiness and wisdom lies not at either extreme, but in the skillful balance between them. This discovery, known as the middle way, offers a profoundly practical approach to living that can transform every aspect of your daily experience. Picture a skilled musician tuning a stringed instrument. If the strings are too loose, they produce no clear sound, just dull, lifeless vibrations. If the strings are too tight, they create harsh, unpleasant tones and may even snap under the pressure. But when the strings are tuned to just the right tension, neither too loose nor too tight, they produce beautiful, harmonious music. Your life is like this instrument, and the middle way teaches you how to find the perfect tuning. The Buddha discovered this principle through his own life experience. As a young prince, he lived in extreme luxury, surrounded by every pleasure and comfort imaginable. He had fine foods, beautiful clothes, entertainment, and protection from all of life's difficulties. Yet despite having everything most people dream of, he felt a deep dissatisfaction and sense that something essential was missing. The pursuit of pleasure, taken to its extreme, did not lead to genuine fulfillment. When he left the palace to seek spiritual understanding, he went to the opposite extreme. He practiced severe asceticism, depriving his body of food and comfort, pushing himself through painful disciplines, believing that suffering would lead to enlightenment. He became so thin that when he touched his stomach, he could feel his backbone. Yet this extreme approach also failed to bring the understanding he sought. His mind became too weak and clouded by physical deprivation to perceive clearly. It was only when he abandoned both extremes and chose a middle path that breakthrough occurred. He began eating enough to maintain his health while not indulging excessively. He practiced diligently while also being gentle with himself. He remained committed to his spiritual development while not forcing or straining. In this balanced state, his mind became clear and receptive, and he achieved the profound understanding that transformed him into the Buddha. This principle of balance applies to every area of modern life. Consider your relationship with work. At one extreme, you might become a workaholic, believing that constant busyness and achievement will bring security and satisfaction. You sacrifice relationships, health, and simple pleasures in pursuit of professional success. At the other extreme, you might avoid responsibility and challenge, believing that minimal effort will lead to happiness. You miss opportunities for growth and contribution, often feeling unfulfilled and anxious about the future. The middle way approach to work involves finding the balance between engagement and detachment. You can work diligently and skillfully while not making your job the sole source of your identity and worth. You can strive for excellence while not being devastated by setbacks or failures. You can be responsible and productive while also maintaining time for rest, relationships, and activities that nourish your soul. This balanced approach often leads to better work performance, as well as greater overall life satisfaction. The same principle applies to your relationship with money and material possessions. At one extreme lies greed and materialism, the belief that accumulating wealth and objects will bring lasting happiness. People caught in this extreme often sacrifice their health, relationships, and values in pursuit of financial gain. They may achieve material success, but find themselves feeling empty and anxious. At the other extreme lies the rejection of all material concerns, believing that poverty or complete detachment from worldly matters is inherently spiritual. The middle way recognizes that money and possessions are tools that can support a meaningful life when used skillfully. You can work to meet your genuine needs and even enjoy some pleasures and comforts while not being driven by endless wanting. You can appreciate material blessings without becoming attached to them. You can be generous and share your resources while also being responsible about your own security. This balanced approach brings freedom from both the anxiety of constant wanting and the stress of financial insecurity. In relationships, the middle way offers guidance between the extremes of excessive attachment and complete detachment. At one extreme, you might become so dependent on others for happiness that you lose your own identity and autonomy. You might cling to relationships out of fear of loneliness, tolerating unhealthy situations, rather than risk being alone. At the other extreme, you might avoid deep connections entirely, believing that independence requires isolation. You miss the profound joy and growth that come from intimate human connection. The middle way in relationships involves learning to love deeply while maintaining your individual wholeness. You can care profoundly about others without making their happiness your sole responsibility. You can enjoy closeness and intimacy while respecting both your own and others' need for space and autonomy. You can commit to relationships while also being prepared to let go gracefully if circumstances change. This approach creates relationships that are both passionate and peaceful, connected and free. The middle way also applies to how you relate to your own emotions and thoughts. At one extreme, you might suppress all difficult feelings, believing that spiritual or mature people should always be calm and positive. You push down anger, sadness, fear and frustration, creating inner tension and cutting yourself off from important information about your needs and values. At the other extreme, you might indulge every emotion fully, believing that expressing all feelings is healthy and authentic. You become controlled by temporary emotional states, often hurting yourself and others through unwise reactions. The middle way with emotions involves feeling them fully while not being controlled by them. You can acknowledge anger without acting destructively. You can experience sadness without becoming lost in despair. You can feel fear without being paralyzed by it. You learn to be present with your emotional experience while maintaining the wisdom to respond rather than simply react. This emotional balance brings both authenticity and skillfulness to your interactions. Even in spiritual practice, the middle way provides essential guidance. At one extreme, you might become obsessive about meditation, study, and spiritual disciplines, believing that more is always better. You create stress and pressure around practices that are meant to bring peace. At the other extreme, you might practice sporadically or not at all, believing that enlightenment should happen effortlessly without consistent effort. You miss the benefits that come from patient, sustained practice. The middle way in spiritual practice involves what the Buddha called right effort, consistent but not forced, dedicated but not obsessive. You can maintain regular practices while adapting to changing life circumstances. You can be sincere about your spiritual development while maintaining a sense of humor and lightness. You can seek transformation while accepting yourself as you are right now. This balanced approach allows spiritual practice to become a natural, sustainable part of life, rather than another source of pressure or self-judgment. One of the most practical applications of the middle way is in how you approach goals and ambitions. At one extreme, you might become so driven by achievement that you lose touch with joy in the present moment. Every experience becomes evaluated in terms of whether it brings you closer to your goals. You sacrifice relationships, health, and simple pleasures for future rewards that may never feel satisfying once attained. At the other extreme, you might avoid setting goals entirely, believing that ambition is inherently selfish, or that planning interferes with living in the present. The middle way allows you to hold intentions and work toward objectives while remaining flexible and present. You can plan for the future while finding contentment in current circumstances. You can strive for improvement while appreciating what you already have. You can pursue dreams while being prepared to adapt when reality presents different opportunities. This approach brings both effectiveness and peace to your endeavors. The middle way is not about compromise or settling for mediocrity. It is about finding the optimal point of balance that allows for maximum effectiveness and minimum suffering. Like a tightrope walker who maintains perfect balance through constant micro-adjustments, living the middle way requires ongoing awareness and gentle corrections. You notice when you are veering too far toward one extreme or another, and compassionately guide yourself back to center. This practice begins with developing sensitivity to your own rhythms and needs. Some days you may need more solitude, other days, more social connection. Some periods of life call for intense focus and effort, others for rest and reflection. Some situations require firm boundaries, others benefit from flexibility and accommodation. The middle way teaches you to respond to these varying conditions with wisdom rather than rigidly applying the same approach to every situation. Consider how this applies to something as simple as eating. At one extreme, you might become obsessive about food, rigidly controlling every bite according to strict rules about what is healthy or spiritual. Food becomes a source of anxiety rather than nourishment and pleasure. At the other extreme, you might eat without any awareness, consuming whatever you crave whenever you want it. This can lead to health problems and a disconnection from your body's actual needs. The middle way with food involves eating with awareness and moderation. You can enjoy delicious meals while paying attention to your body's signals of hunger and fullness. You can make healthy choices most of the time while occasionally indulging in treats without guilt. You can appreciate food as both fuel for your body and one of life's pleasures. This balanced approach brings both physical health and psychological freedom around eating. The middle way also offers profound guidance for dealing with difficult people and situations. At one extreme, you might become aggressive and confrontational, believing that force is the only way to create change. This approach often escalates conflicts and damages relationships. At the other extreme, you might become completely passive, avoiding all conflict even when important boundaries need to be maintained. This can lead to resentment and enable harmful behavior to continue. The middle way teaches what Buddhists call compassionate firmness. You can set clear boundaries while remaining kind in your communication. You can stand up for your values while not attacking others for having different perspectives. you can address problems directly while maintaining respect for everyone's humanity. This approach often leads to better outcomes and preserves relationships even during difficult conversations. Perhaps most importantly, the middle way teaches you how to hold apparent contradictions with grace. Life is full of paradoxes that cannot be resolved through logical thinking alone. You can be completely committed to your spiritual growth while fully accepting yourself as you are. You can work diligently for positive change while maintaining equanimity about outcomes. You can love deeply while remaining unattached to specific results. The middle way shows you how to embrace these paradoxes rather than being frustrated by them. This capacity to hold paradox extends to how you understand the Buddha's teachings themselves. The middle way warns against taking any spiritual concept to an extreme, even concepts like detachment or compassion. Detachment taken too far becomes cold indifference. Compassion taken too far becomes enabling codependence. Even the middle way itself should not become a rigid doctrine, but rather a flexible principle that adapts to the unique circumstances of each moment. Learning to live the middle way is like learning to ride a bicycle. At first, you might overcorrect, swinging from one side to the other as you try to find your balance. But with practice, the corrections become smaller and more natural. Eventually, maintaining balance becomes so automatic that you can focus on where you are going rather than on the mechanics of staying upright. Similarly, as you develop skill in the middle way, finding balance becomes a natural expression of wisdom rather than an effortful practice. The middle way also teaches patience with your own learning process. You will sometimes go too far in one direction or another. You will occasionally react with too much intensity or not enough responsiveness. Rather than judging these experiences as failures, you can appreciate them as valuable feedback that helps you calibrate your responses more skillfully in the future. Every mistake becomes a teacher pointing you toward greater balance. One of the most beautiful aspects of the middle way is how it naturally increases your compassion for others. When you understand how challenging it is to find balance in your own life, you become more patient with others who are struggling with the same challenge. You recognize that most difficult behavior comes from people being caught in extremes, either too rigid or too loose, too attached or too detached, too aggressive or too passive. Instead of judging them, you can offer understanding and perhaps model a more balanced approach. The middle way ultimately teaches you that wisdom is not about having the right answers, but about asking the right questions. Instead of, "What should I do?" you learn to ask, "What does this situation need right now?" Instead of, "What is the correct approach?" you ask, "How can I respond with both kindness and clarity?" Instead of, "How can I avoid suffering?" you ask, "How can I work skillfully with whatever arises?" These questions naturally lead you toward balanced, compassionate responses. As you prepare for sleep tonight, consider the areas of your life where you might be stuck in extremes. Are there places where you are pushing too hard or not engaging enough? Are there relationships where you are either clinging too tightly or holding too much distance? Are there aspects of yourself that you are either suppressing or indulging without awareness? Hold these questions gently, without needing to solve everything immediately. Simply bringing awareness to imbalances is the first step toward finding your natural center. Rest in the understanding that balance is not a destination you reach once and maintain forever. It is a dynamic process of continual adjustment, like a dance that responds to the changing music of life. Trust in your innate wisdom to find the appropriate response to each situation. Sleep peacefully in the knowledge that you do not need to have everything figured out. You simply need to stay present and responsive to what each moment asks of you. Living stories, wisdom through Buddhist parables. Throughout history, the deepest truths have often been shared, not through abstract philosophy, but through simple stories that speak directly to the heart. The Buddha was a masterful storyteller, using parables and metaphors to illuminate the most profound aspects of human existence. Tonight, we will journey through some of these timeless tales, allowing their wisdom to settle into your consciousness like seeds that will bloom in their own time. There once was a man traveling alone on a dangerous road. As he walked, he heard the thundering hooves of horses behind him and turned to see bandits in pursuit. Fearing for his life, he ran until he reached the edge of a deep precipice. Below, he could see a terrible drop that would certainly mean death if he fell. But hanging over the edge was a vine that offered his only chance of escape. Without hesitation, the man grabbed the vine and began lowering himself down the cliff face. But as he hung there, suspended between the bandits above and the deadly fall below, he noticed something that filled him with new terror. At the bottom of the precipice, a massive dragon waited with its mouth open, flames flickering from its jaws. The man realized he was trapped. He could not climb back up to face the bandits, and he could not drop down into the dragon's waiting mouth. As he clung to the vine in desperation, he noticed two mice, one black and one white, gnawing steadily at the vine just above his hands. With each passing moment, the vine grew thinner and weaker. Soon, it would snap, sending him plummeting to his doom. Yet in this moment of absolute terror, the man noticed something extraordinary. On a branch near his face, wild honey was dripping from a beehive. Despite his desperate situation, he found himself captivated by the sweetness of the honey and reached out to taste it. This story, beloved by Buddhist teachers for centuries, contains the entire human condition in its simple narrative. The traveling man represents each of us, journeying through life on our own. The pursuing bandits symbolize old age, illness, and death, the inevitable pursuers that drive us forward through our days. The precipice represents the dangerous edge of existence, where we often find ourselves, caught between competing fears and desires. The vine is our fragile hold on life itself, always temporary, always uncertain. The black and white mice represent day and night, continuously gnawing away at our remaining time. Each sunset brings us closer to our final moment. Each sunrise reminds us that our days are numbered. The dragon below represents the fear of death that waits for all of us, no matter how cleverly we try to avoid it. But the honey represents something beautiful and profound. Even in the most precarious circumstances, life offers moments of sweetness and wonder. The man's ability to taste the honey while facing death shows us something essential about human consciousness. We have the remarkable capacity to find beauty, meaning, and even joy in the midst of life's most challenging circumstances. This is not denial or foolishness. It is perhaps the most sophisticated response possible to the reality of existence. This story teaches us that waiting for perfect security before we allow ourselves to enjoy life is a recipe for missing life entirely. The man could have spent his final moments in pure terror, fixated only on his dangers. Instead, he found a way to appreciate the sweetness available in that very moment. This does not mean ignoring real challenges or being recklessly optimistic. It means developing the wisdom to hold both the difficulties and the gifts of life simultaneously. Another powerful story tells of a woman whose only child died suddenly. Overwhelmed by grief, she carried the child's body through her village, begging everyone she met to give her medicine that would bring her child back to life. People looked at her with pity, but no one could help. Finally, someone directed her to seek out the Buddha, who was known for his healing wisdom. When the grieving mother found the Buddha and made her desperate request, he looked at her with infinite compassion. "I can help you," he said gently, "but first you must bring me a single mustard seed from a household that has never known death." Filled with hope, the woman immediately began searching. She went from house to house throughout the village, explaining her quest and asking for a mustard seed. At the first house, the family was willing to give her mustard seeds, but when she asked if anyone in the household had ever died, they told her about a grandfather who had passed away the previous year. At the second house, they spoke of a daughter who had died in childhood. At the third, a father who had been lost to illness. House after house, the story was the same. Every family had experienced the death of someone they loved. As the day wore on, the woman's understanding began to shift. She realized that her suffering, while intensely personal, was also universal. Death was not a cruel exception that had singled out her family. It was part of the natural cycle that every living being must face. This recognition did not eliminate her grief, but it transformed her relationship to it. She was no longer alone in her suffering. She was part of the vast community of beings who had loved deeply and experienced loss. When she returned to the Buddha at the end of the day, she carried no mustard seed, but she carried something far more valuable. The understanding that her pain connected her to all of humanity rather than separating her from it. The Buddha received her with the same gentle compassion and helped her see that this understanding was the beginning of healing, not the cure she had sought, but the wisdom she actually needed. This story reveals one of the most important truths about suffering, that it becomes more bearable when we recognize its universal nature. When we believe our pain is unique or unfair, we add the suffering of isolation to the unavoidable suffering of loss. When we understand that pain is part of the shared human experience, we can draw strength from the countless others who have walked this path before us. Our individual suffering becomes a doorway to compassion for all beings. There is another story about a king who commissioned his wisest advisors to create a ring that would make him happy when he was sad and humble, when he became too proud. After much deliberation, the advisors returned with a simple gold band inscribed with 4 words, "This too shall pass." When the king wore the ring and read these words during times of despair, he remembered that his current troubles were temporary. When he read them during times of triumph, he remembered that his successes were also impermanent. The ring became his most treasured possession because it contained the wisdom to navigate all of life's changes. This simple phrase, "This too shall pass," captures one of Buddhism's most fundamental insights. Everything in life is temporary. Your current problems will change. Your present joys will evolve. Your circumstances will shift. This understanding brings comfort during difficult times and prevents attachment during pleasant ones. It teaches you to hold all experiences lightly, appreciating them without clinging to them. Consider how this wisdom applies to your own life. When you are going through a challenging period, the situation can feel permanent and overwhelming. But remembering that this too shall pass helps you maintain perspective and hope. The difficulty is real, but it is not your permanent condition. Similarly, during times of happiness and success, this understanding helps you enjoy your good fortune without the anxiety of trying to make it last forever. Another beloved tale speaks of a man who inherited a wild horse. His neighbors congratulated him on his good fortune. "How wonderful," they said. But the man simply replied, "We shall see." A few days later, the horse ran away, and the neighbors offered their condolences. "How terrible," they exclaimed. Again, the man said only, "We shall see." The next week, the horse returned, bringing with it a herd of wild horses. The neighbors were amazed at this sudden wealth. "How fortunate you are," they marveled. "We shall see," the man repeated. Soon after, while trying to tame one of the wild horses, the man's son fell and broke his leg. "What bad luck," the neighbors lamented. "We shall see," came the familiar response. A few months later, a war broke out, and all the young men in the village were conscripted into the army. The man's son, still recovering from his broken leg, was unable to serve and remained safely at home. The neighbors, now understanding the man's wisdom, no longer rushed to judge each event as purely good or bad. They had learned that life's circumstances are far more interconnected and complex than they appear on the surface. This story teaches us about the futility of making absolute judgments about life events. What appears to be a disaster often contains hidden blessings, while apparent good fortune may lead to unexpected challenges. The wise person learns to hold all circumstances with equanimity, neither getting too excited about apparent successes, nor too discouraged by apparent failures. This does not mean becoming indifferent, but rather developing the perspective to see beyond immediate appearances. These stories work their magic not through logical argument, but through touching something deeper in your consciousness. They bypass the analytical mind and speak directly to your intuitive wisdom. As you reflect on them, you may find insights arising that you cannot fully explain, but that feel profoundly true. This is the power of wisdom teachings. They awaken understanding that was already present within you, waiting to be recognized. Tonight, as you settle into rest, allow these stories to continue working in your consciousness. Let their wisdom permeate your dreams and emerge in your daily life when you need guidance. Remember that you too are living a story, a unique and precious tale of awakening and growth. Trust that your story, with all its challenges and blessings, is unfolding exactly as it needs to for your highest learning and development. Rest peacefully in the knowledge that you are both the author and the hero of your own journey toward wisdom. The pure mind, returning to your original nature. In the deepest silence of your being, beneath all the noise of daily thoughts and concerns, there exists a place of perfect stillness. This place has been with you since, before you learned language, before you formed an identity, before you began the complex dance of being human. The Buddha called this your original mind, pure, spacious, and naturally at peace. Tonight, we will explore this fundamental aspect of your nature and learn how to return to it as easily as coming home. Imagine a clear mountain lake on a perfectly still day. The water is so transparent that you can see straight to the bottom, and so motionless that it reflects the sky like a perfect mirror. Now picture what happens when a strong wind begins to blow. The surface becomes choppy with waves, the clarity is disturbed by movement, and the perfect reflection is broken into countless fragments. But here is the important point. The essential nature of the water has not changed. It is still the same pure, clear water. When the wind dies down, the lake naturally returns to its original stillness and clarity. Your mind is like this mountain lake. Your original nature is pure awareness, clear, peaceful, and naturally reflective of truth. The winds that disturb this clarity are your thoughts, emotions, worries, and the endless mental commentary that fills most of your waking hours. But just like the lake, these disturbances do not change your essential nature. No matter how agitated your mind becomes, the pure awareness beneath remains untouched. And just like the lake, when the mental winds calm down, your natural clarity spontaneously returns. This understanding brings tremendous relief to anyone who has struggled with difficult thoughts or emotions. You may have believed that anxiety, depression, anger, or confusion were permanent features of who you are. But from the perspective of pure mind teaching, these are temporary weather patterns moving through the sky of your consciousness. They are real and sometimes challenging, but they are not your identity. Beneath all psychological turbulence lies your unchanging essence, aware, peaceful, and whole. The Buddha used another beautiful metaphor to illustrate this truth. He compared the pure mind to the sky itself. Clouds of all shapes and sizes move through the sky. Dark storm clouds, light fluffy clouds, massive thunderheads, and wispy high cirrus formations. Some clouds bring rain, others bring snow. Still others pass by without dropping any moisture at all. But the sky itself is never stained or damaged by any weather that moves through it. After the most violent thunderstorm, the sky emerges as clear and blue as ever. Your thoughts and emotions are like these clouds. Some are dark and heavy, bringing storms of anger or sadness. Others are light and pleasant, bringing gentle rain of joy or contentment. But the awareness in which all these mental events appear is like the sky, vast, unchanging, and untouched by whatever passes through it. Learning to identify with this sky-like awareness, rather than with the temporary clouds of thought and emotion, is one of the most liberating discoveries you can make. This shift in identification changes everything about how you experience life. Instead of thinking, "I am angry," you begin to notice anger is arising in awareness. Instead of, "I am anxious," you observe anxiety is moving through like a cloud. Instead of, "I am confused," you recognize confusion is present, but the awareness observing it remains clear. This is not just playing with words. It reflects a fundamental shift in understanding about what you really are. Most people spend their lives completely identified with the contents of their consciousness, rather than with consciousness itself. They think they are their thoughts, their emotions, their memories, their roles, their achievements, and their problems. But all of these are objects appearing in awareness. You are the awareness in which they appear. Recognizing this distinction is like waking up from a dream in which you thought you were one of the characters, only to realize you were actually the dreamer. This awakening to your nature as pure awareness has immediate practical benefits. When you are no longer completely identified with your thoughts, they lose much of their power to disturb you. You can observe anxious thoughts without becoming anxious. You can notice angry thoughts without being controlled by anger. You can watch sad thoughts without drowning in sadness. The thoughts are still there, but you are no longer trapped inside them. This does not mean becoming emotionally numb or disconnected from your human experience. Rather, it means experiencing your emotions from a place of spacious awareness rather than tight identification. You can feel deeply while also maintaining perspective. You can care passionately while also holding things lightly. You can engage fully with life while resting in the peace that underlies all experience. The practice of returning to pure mind begins with simple recognition. Right now, as you listen to these words, notice that you are aware. You are aware of the sounds, aware of any thoughts that arise, aware of sensations in your body. This awareness itself, not what it is aware of, but the knowing quality itself, is the most direct pointer to your pure mind. It requires no special training to access, no particular beliefs to adopt. It is closer to you than your own breath. Throughout your day, you can practice returning attention to this aware presence. When you notice that you have become caught up in worry, gently shift your attention from the content of the worry to the awareness that knows the worry is present. When you find yourself lost in planning or remembering, softly return to the present moment awareness that is always here. When emotions feel overwhelming, rest attention in the spacious awareness that remains calm, even when strong feelings are moving through it. This practice is like learning to relax into your natural state, rather than constantly swimming upstream against the current of life. Most people exhaust themselves by trying to control their thoughts, fight their emotions, and manage their experience through mental effort. But pure mind teaching suggests a different approach. Simply rest in what you already are. Stop trying to fix, change, or improve your consciousness, and instead recognize its inherent perfection. This recognition often happens in moments of natural stillness. Perhaps when you are sitting quietly in nature, or in the peaceful moment just before sleep, or in the soft silence after meditation. Suddenly, without any effort, you find yourself resting in a space of perfect calm and clarity. In these moments, you are not thinking about peace, you are simply being peace. You are not trying to be aware, you are simply resting as awareness itself. The Buddha taught that this pure mind is not something you need to create or achieve. It is your natural condition, always present, simply waiting to be recognized. It is like the sun, which is always shining even when clouds temporarily obscure it from view. Your job is not to make the sun shine. Your job is simply to notice when the clouds part and the sun's radiance becomes visible. This understanding brings a profound relaxation to spiritual practice. Instead of striving to become enlightened, you learn to recognize the enlightened awareness that is already present. Instead of trying to achieve special states of consciousness, you discover the extraordinary nature of ordinary awareness. Instead of seeking to transcend your humanity, you find the divine essence that has always been the core of your human experience. The pure mind is also naturally compassionate. When you rest in awareness itself, rather than being caught up in the drama of personal thoughts and emotions, love naturally flows. This is not love as an emotion that comes and goes, but love as the fundamental nature of consciousness itself. It is the love that exists between parent and child before any words are spoken, the love that connects you to nature when you simply sit quietly among trees, the love that arises spontaneously when you see another being suffering. From this perspective, cultivating compassion is not about forcing yourself to feel loving toward difficult people. It is about removing the barriers that obscure your naturally loving nature. These barriers are usually thoughts, judgments about others, stories about yourself, beliefs about how life should be different. When these mental constructions relax, love is simply what remains. This pure mind is also naturally wise. The wisdom that flows from this source is not intellectual knowledge gained through study, but direct insight that arises spontaneously when the mind is clear. You have probably experienced this kind of wisdom in moments when you suddenly knew exactly what to do in a difficult situation, even though you could not explain how you knew. This knowing came not from thinking, but from the deeper intelligence that is your essential nature. As you develop familiarity with resting in pure mind, you begin to notice that most of your suffering comes from getting caught up in mental elaborations, rather than from your actual present moment experience. For example, if you are facing a challenge at work, the actual situation may require practical attention and skillful action. But the mental story you create about the situation, worrying about what it means about your competence, imagining worst-case scenarios, comparing yourself to others, creates additional suffering that does not help solve the problem. When you rest in pure awareness, you can respond to life's challenges from clarity rather than reactivity. You can address practical problems without getting lost in emotional drama. You can make decisions from wisdom rather than from fear or desire. You can communicate with others from authenticity rather than from defensive patterns. This does not mean becoming cold or detached. It means becoming more genuinely present and effective. The practice of returning to pure mind is especially powerful at night as you prepare for sleep. During the day, your awareness becomes focused on external tasks and internal concerns. But as you settle into rest, you can allow this focused attention to relax back into its natural spaciousness. You can let go of the day's activities and rest in the aware presence that has been with you through every experience. This is not something you need to do perfectly or achieve as a special state. Simply allowing your attention to soften and become less directed naturally reveals the spacious awareness that is always present. It is like releasing a tight fist and allowing your hand to return to its natural openness. No effort is required, only the willingness to stop efforting. As you rest in this natural awareness, you may notice that the boundary between sleeping and waking becomes less important. The awareness that knows your waking experience is the same awareness that knows your dreams. Deep, dreamless sleep occurs in this same awareness. From this perspective, you never actually lose consciousness. You simply experience different contents within the same fundamental awareness. This understanding can transform your relationship to sleep itself. Instead of seeing sleep as unconsciousness or lost time, you can appreciate it as a return to your most fundamental nature. In deep sleep, when all mental activity subsides, only pure awareness remains. This is why you often wake up feeling refreshed and renewed. You have been resting in your essential nature all night. Tonight, as you allow yourself to drift towards sleep, experiment with resting in this pure awareness. Do not try to create or maintain any particular state. Simply allow your attention to relax from its focus on specific thoughts and concerns, and rest in the open awareness that naturally remains. Let this awareness be like a vast, welcoming space in which all experience can arise and pass away without disturbance. If thoughts arise, let them be like clouds passing through the sky of awareness. If emotions surface, allow them to move through, like weather patterns. If your body feels restless or uncomfortable, let these sensations be temporary visitors in the spacious awareness that you are. You do not need to push anything away or hold on to anything. Simply rest in the natural openness of your being. As sleep approaches, you may find that the distinction between awareness and what awareness knows begins to dissolve. This is a natural settling into your pure mind, not as something separate from experience, but as the very essence of all experience. Let yourself dissolve into this fundamental nature with complete trust and relaxation. Sleep becomes not an escape from awareness, but a return to awareness in its most essential form. The compassionate heart, love as the path to liberation. At the very center of Buddhist wisdom lies a truth so simple that it can be understood by a child, yet so profound that it encompasses the deepest mysteries of existence. This truth is that love, not romantic love or sentimental affection, but the fundamental capacity for compassion, is both the path to liberation and liberation itself. As our journey together draws toward its peaceful conclusion, let us explore how opening your heart completely can free you from every form of suffering. In a world that often seems harsh and competitive, the Buddha's teaching about compassion might sound naive or impractical. How can love solve real problems? How can kindness address genuine injustice? How can compassion protect you from those who might take advantage of your openness? These are important questions that deserve thoughtful answers. The compassion that Buddhism teaches is not weakness disguised as virtue. It is perhaps the strongest and most intelligent force in the universe. True compassion begins with a clear-eyed recognition of suffering, both your own and that of others. It does not pretend that everything is fine when it is not. It does not avoid difficult realities or uncomfortable truths. Instead, it looks directly at pain and difficulty with a heart willing to understand and respond skillfully. This kind of compassion is like a doctor who must accurately diagnose a disease before providing effective treatment. The Buddha taught that all beings want the same fundamental things. Everyone wants to be happy and free from suffering. Everyone wants to feel safe and loved. Everyone wants their life to have meaning and purpose. When you truly understand this, it becomes impossible to see others as fundamentally different from yourself. The person who cuts you off in traffic, the colleague who takes credit for your work, the family member who disappoints you repeatedly, all are struggling with their own pain and seeking happiness in the only ways they know how. This recognition does not excuse harmful behavior or make boundaries unnecessary. Understanding why someone acts destructively does not mean you should allow them to harm you or others. But it does mean that you can respond to difficult people and situations from wisdom and strength rather than from fear and reactivity. You can protect yourself and others while maintaining your heart's openness. You can address problems directly while still holding compassion for everyone involved. Consider how this works in practice. When someone speaks to you rudely, your immediate reaction might be anger and the desire to respond defensively. But if you pause and remember that their rudeness likely comes from their own stress, pain, or insecurity, a different response becomes possible. You might still need to address their behavior clearly, but you can do so without adding fuel to the fire of conflict. You might say something like, "I can see you're upset, and I want to understand what's wrong, but I need you to speak to me respectfully." This compassionate approach often diffuses tension more effectively than defensive reactions. When people feel understood rather than attacked, they are more likely to calm down and engage constructively. When you respond to aggression with firm but kind boundaries, you model a better way of handling conflict. This does not always work immediately, but over time, your consistent compassion can transform relationships and situations in ways that seemed impossible. The practice of compassion begins with yourself. Most people carry around a harsh inner critic that constantly judges and berates them for their mistakes, limitations, and imperfections. This internal voice tells you that you are not good enough, smart enough, successful enough, or worthy enough. It believes that criticism and shame will motivate you to improve, but actually they usually create the opposite effect. Shame and self-hatred drain your energy and undermine your confidence, making positive change more difficult. Learning to treat yourself with the same kindness you would show to a good friend going through difficulties is revolutionary. When you make a mistake, instead of harsh self-judgment, you can offer yourself understanding and encouragement. When you are struggling with challenges, instead of criticism, you can provide yourself with the support and compassion you need. This is not self-indulgence or making excuses. It is creating the emotional conditions in which genuine growth and healing can occur. There is a beautiful practice called loving-kindness meditation that can help develop this self-compassion. You begin by bringing yourself to mind with genuine care and silently offering yourself wishes for well-being. You might say, "May I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be at peace, may I be free from suffering." As you repeat these phrases, you allow the intention behind the words to resonate in your heart. You are not trying to force any particular feeling, but simply cultivating a genuine wish for your own happiness and freedom. From this foundation of self-compassion, you can gradually extend the same loving wishes to others. You might bring to mind someone you care about and offer them the same intentions. May you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be at peace, may you be free from suffering. Then you can include neutral people, acquaintances, strangers, people you neither like nor dislike. Eventually, you can even include difficult people in your circle of compassion. This does not mean approving of harmful behavior, but recognizing that even difficult people deserve happiness and freedom from the pain that drives their unskillful actions. As you practice this expansion of compassion, something remarkable happens. The boundaries between self and other begin to soften. You start to experience what the Buddha called the compassionate heart, a love that is not limited by personal preferences or judgments. This love arises naturally when you truly understand the interconnected nature of all life. When you realize that your well-being and others' well-being are intimately connected, caring for others becomes as natural as caring for yourself. This universal compassion is not an emotional state that you try to maintain. It is more like a shift in perspective, a new way of seeing that recognizes the basic goodness and potential for awakening in every being. From this perspective, helping others is not a duty or sacrifice, but a natural expression of understanding. Just as your right hand naturally helps your left hand when it is injured, when you truly understand your connection to all life, compassionate action flows effortlessly. This does not mean becoming passive or allowing others to take advantage of your kindness. Compassionate action sometimes requires saying no, setting boundaries, or even confronting harmful behavior directly. But these actions arise from love rather than anger, from wisdom rather than fear. They aim to reduce suffering for everyone involved, rather than simply protecting your own interests. This kind of compassionate strength is more effective than reactive responses because it comes from a place of clarity and genuine care. The Buddha taught that developing a compassionate heart is not only beneficial for others, it is the most direct path to your own liberation from suffering. When your heart is closed and defensive, you live in a state of constant tension and separation. When your heart is open and compassionate, you experience the natural peace and joy that come from alignment with your true nature. Love is not something you do, it is something you are, when all the barriers to love are removed. These barriers are usually forms of fear, fear of being hurt, fear of being taken advantage of, fear of being seen as weak, fear of caring too much about people who might leave or disappoint you. While these fears are understandable, they often cause more suffering than the situations they are trying to protect you from. Living with a closed heart may feel safer, but it cuts you off from the joy, connection, and meaning that make life worth living. Opening your heart does not mean becoming naive or ignoring red flags in relationships. It means learning to love wisely, caring deeply, while also maintaining appropriate boundaries, trusting others, while also taking reasonable precautions, giving generously, while also ensuring your own well-being. This kind of wise love is like the sun, which shines on everyone equally while maintaining its own integrity and strength. As you go through your daily life, you can practice cultivating this compassionate heart through simple acts of kindness. Smile genuinely at people you encounter. Listen fully when someone is speaking to you. Offer help when you see someone struggling. Send loving thoughts to people who are difficult or annoying. These small acts may seem insignificant, but they gradually transform your heart and create ripples of positive change in the world around you. You can also practice compassion by working with your own difficult emotions skillfully. When anger arises, instead of suppressing it or acting it out destructively, you can hold it with understanding. Anger often contains important information about your values and boundaries, but it needs the guidance of wisdom and compassion to be expressed constructively. When sadness arises, you can allow yourself to feel it fully, while also offering yourself comfort and support. When fear surfaces, you can acknowledge it with kindness, while also taking appropriate action to address legitimate concerns. This compassionate approach to your own emotions gradually extends to how you relate to others' emotions as well. Instead of being triggered by other people's anger, sadness, or fear, you can recognize these as expressions of their own pain and respond with understanding. This does not mean taking responsibility for other people's emotional states, but it does mean approaching them with patience and wisdom rather than reactivity. Perhaps the most profound aspect of developing a compassionate heart is that it reveals the true nature of happiness. Most people search for happiness through getting what they want and avoiding what they do not want. But this approach leads to a conditional happiness that depends on external circumstances. The happiness that comes from an open, compassionate heart is unconditional. It does not depend on everything going your way or everyone treating you well. It arises from the natural joy of living in alignment with love. This unconditional happiness is available to you right now, regardless of your circumstances. It does not require that you fix all your problems, achieve all your goals, or become a perfect person. It simply requires that you open your heart to what is present right now with acceptance and love. Even in the midst of difficulties, when you can hold your experience with compassion, a deep peace, and even joy becomes possible. As our time together comes to a close, let your heart rest in this natural compassion. Feel how it naturally wants to extend care and kindness to all beings, including yourself. This is not something you need to create or achieve. It is your true nature shining forth when all barriers are removed. Rest in the warmth and openness of your compassionate heart as you drift into peaceful sleep. Let this love be the last thing you experience before sleep and the first thing you remember upon waking. May you sleep deeply in the embrace of universal love, and may you awaken refreshed and ready to share this love with the world. As our 3-hour journey through Buddhist wisdom draws to its gentle close, we return to where we began, to the simple recognition that within you lies everything you need for lasting peace and happiness. You have touched the 4 noble truths, explored the interconnected web of existence, and discovered the fluid nature of your true self. You have seen through illusions to find the workable nature of all experience. You have learned how your mind creates your world and how to work skillfully with this creative power. You have uncovered the hidden treasure of your Buddha nature and found the middle way that brings balance to life's complexities. Through ancient stories, you have touched timeless truths, returned to your pure mind, and opened the compassionate heart that is your birthright. Remember, dear friend, that tonight's journey is not an ending but a beginning. This wisdom wants to express itself through your daily life, your relationships, your challenges, and your moments of joy. Every situation you encounter is an opportunity to practice these teachings and live from the peace that is your deepest nature. Tomorrow, you will still face ordinary human challenges, traffic and deadlines, difficult people and unexpected problems. But now you have tools for working with these experiences skillfully. You know that suffering is optional, that you are connected to all life, and that your true nature is spacious and free. Most importantly, you are not alone on this path. For over 2,000 years, countless beings have walked this same journey of awakening. You are part of an endless stream of consciousness that flows through all who have touched these teachings and recognized their truth. Let this knowledge comfort you as you settle into rest. You are held in the infinite web of compassion that connects all beings. You are supported by the wisdom of countless teachers and fellow travelers. Rest in this support, sleep in this love, and wake tomorrow ready to share the gifts you have received. The journey home to your true nature is measured not in miles or years, but in moments of recognition. Each time you choose compassion over anger, each time you find peace in chaos, you take another step toward the home you have never actually left. Each breath is a chance to return, each moment a doorway to the freedom that has always been yours. May you sleep deeply and peacefully tonight, cradled in the boundless love that is your true nature. May you wake tomorrow, refreshed and ready to live from the understanding you have touched tonight. And may all beings everywhere find the same peace and freedom that the Buddha discovered and shared with infinite generosity. From Moonlight Temple, we offer these teachings like flowers scattered on the path of awakening. The Buddha within you knows the way home. Rest now in that perfect knowing, that endless love, that peace beyond all understanding. Sleep well, dear friend. Sleep well,